Hey Connie, we're going to take a look at your final projects here. I think, in terms of additions that were being implemented from the last time we saw it, I really like the plant life that's being put into place, which creates a little bit of contrast between all the warmer colors that are in the room. The rug is a nice touch, and the tree in the background is a nice touch, although I think it's placed in a way that makes it feel a little bit too kind of too purposeful. I think if it was just slightly off to the side, it would feel a little bit more natural. It just feels a little bit too symmetrical in how even it is in the middle and that. But I like the coloring, that these elements bring to the scene. They add a little bit of variety and they kind of push things out a little bit more. Coverage-wise, I think the addition of the plants, there's some areas like where the sun actually kind of creeps into the plant here or here, where there's just some very, very uneven kind of coverage around the edges of the plant that I think could definitely be cleaned up a little bit more, because I think they take away from the overall convincing nature of things. I think we still are running into a lot of perspective issues, though. That to me seems to be the main kind of issue here. And again, I think, like I had mentioned in the last assignment, the biggest problem is that since the vanishing points are so close to the edge of the drawing, you really end up getting a lot of these extremely severe angles to things. Perspective is not quite as consistent as it could be either. The rug looks like it's kind of moving a little bit towards a different direction, vanishing point wise, as everything else, even though it's kind of aligning with everything else a certain way. It doesn't feel like it's receding as much as it could either. But there's also kind of issues like I've drawn these two lines. There's kind of one here and there's one here, and what these top kind of lines are showing is the vanishing points and how they would be kind of rendering the wall if we were to actually see the ceiling. At its lowest point, if we were to kind of see the ceiling at its lowest point, which is right here, since we don't really see it at all, you would have a wall that kind of moves in this angle, this one where the window is, very, very sharply upward. The pole that the curtains are on would be following along this line, and the window would actually be following along this line pretty closely as well. And then on this side, this kind of line here would actually be where the ceiling and the wall meet on this side. And it's just so sharp that things end up feeling very distorted, or they don't align properly, like the window doesn't align properly with the way that the perspective should really be going. So I think you need to spread the vanishing points out more still. It's just something that if they're too close, you're not able to actually get anything other than what would end up feeling like a fisheye lens point of view, where things are severely distorted and coming at the viewer at these very, very kind of unconvincing and extreme angles. So that's kind of, for me, the biggest thing that I would like to see adjusted. I'd like to see the perspective being applied to the panels on the floor as well, although that's not something that necessarily has to be in place. If the panels are aligning a certain way, you don't have to have perspective applied to them, but it would be nice to have it working in that way, because it feels very odd. And I think coverage is in some areas very good, and in other areas very uneven. The wall in the background, it's darker or it's lighter, or along the floor it's darker or it's lighter, so it feels a little uneven. In other areas like the sun, all the elements of the sun on the wall feel very good, or the fireplace feels very good. So it has its highs and its lows, but I think there's a lot of areas that could see a lot more consistency going on as well. There's some other things like some nice lighting where things are being shaded pretty consistently and they have highlights being applied nicely. Still kind of unclear as to what's going on in the bottom right corner. And texturally, it has some things that work, like the stone and the fur rug, which I think is kind of working nicely, but other ones like the tree and then kind of the couches and the floor not really having any texture, where it feels like it's missing out a little bit.